All right, that's going to do it for me for now. But now it's time for the last word with the great Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. This is one of those nights where some very hard decisions have to be made of what can actually be fit into this hour of television. And this is what I'm so grateful that you're on for an hour before I am, because I'm going to be able to cover some ground that wasn't in your hour. As we try to sort out this avalanche of news coming at us over the weekend.
Yeah, I have left at least one guest sitting in a well-lit room wearing makeup and not getting on television in the past hour as we have been covering breaking news over the course of this hour.
Yeah, it's
for which I'm very sorry.
Well, but it's one of the things that that everyone knows we have to deal with, especially during war coverage as we're in now.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you. Well, Donald Trump is demanding something he has never seen. Donald Trump is demanding something no president in his lifetime has ever achieved: unconditional surrender. On Friday morning at 8:50 a.m., Donald Trump demanded Iran's unconditional surrender in a social media post. The last time the United States of America accepted an unconditional surrender, it took an atomic bomb to get it. In fact, 2 of them. After President Harry Truman became the first and only person in world history to use nuclear weapons against Japan, first in Hiroshima and 3 days later in Nagasaki, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender. Harry Truman had already accepted Germany's unconditional surrender in World War II 3 months earlier. No American president has demanded or accepted an unconditional surrender at the end of an American war since the year before Donald Trump was born, 81 years ago, at the end of World War II. Anyone who has witnessed a war during Donald Trump's lifetime knows that the unconditional surrender of Iran is impossible. Everyone on Wall Street knew that over the weekend when markets began to adjust negatively to an anticipated long-term Trump war in pursuit of the impossible, unconditional surrender. And so, of course, oil prices skyrocketed, the stock market crashed, and Donald Trump today offered his unconditional surrender. Donald Trump is the first American wartime president ruled by the stock market and the oil market. In a phone call with the CBS News reporter today, Donald Trump said, "I think the war is very complete." He said that during stock market trading in the hope of preventing a collapse. Donald Trump didn't mention unconditional surrender again today. And because it was Donald Trump who said unconditional surrender on Friday morning, we knew there was no chance of even Donald Trump holding on to the nonsensical demand of unconditional surrender. When President Franklin Delano Roosevelt announced publicly during World War II that the only peace terms that the United States of America would accept from Germany and Japan was unconditional surrender, the world knew that Franklin Roosevelt meant those 2 words, and everyone in the world, other than the German and Japanese regimes, knew that they could trust those presidential words as fact, as a prediction of what exactly was going to happen. The world knew from that moment on how World War II was going to end. They didn't know how long it was going to last, but they knew World War II was going to end in unconditional surrender because the President of the United States said so. And now the world knows the words of the current President of the United States have no meaning at all. 31 hours after Donald Trump demanded unconditional surrender, in another social media post, Donald Trump said, "We've already won!" exclamation point. Donald Trump doesn't even pay attention to the words of Donald Trump. Unconditional surrender Friday morning. We've already won Saturday afternoon. No unconditional surrender. As oil prices were skyrocketing over the weekend, Donald Trump said that higher oil prices were, quote, a very small price to pay for USA. Well, it is certainly a smaller price to pay than the lives of the members of the American military that have been lost in Donald Trump's first days of Donald Trump's war. Donald Trump made no attempt to look presidential, since he doesn't actually know what that looks like, when he attended the dignified transfer of the bodies of the first 6 soldiers killed in his war. And he didn't remember those soldiers the next day when he wrote about what he called, quote, a very small price to pay for USA. Donald Trump ended his public day today by stepping up to a microphone at one of his golf resorts in Florida, the kind of place where no other president has ever set foot on the 10th day of a war. From the start, Donald Trump has refused to say how long his war would last. Donald Trump had to do that because he knew he might have to surrender at any time. And now that his surrender has come, he can claim that it's because his war is going so well that he can just end it. And that is, of course, exactly what he did today.
We're ahead of our initial timeline by a lot. It's going to be ended soon.
Are you thinking this week it will be over? Are
No,
you
but
talking
soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to
soon.
Donald Trump's day began today with the news that Iran has a new supreme leader who was the son of the supreme leader who was killed on the first day of Donald Trump's war. So Donald Trump has traded an 86-year-old Ayatollah Khamenei for a 56-year-old Ayatollah Khamenei, who is reported to be even more hardline than his father, which makes Donald Trump's Friday morning idea of unconditional surrender even more impossible. And when Donald Trump demanded unconditional surrender with an exclamation point on Friday morning, he also, in the same social media post, demanded the selection of a great and acceptable leader in Iran. Today, Donald Trump said he was disappointed in the choice of Iran's new supreme leader. That was his word, disappointed. But Donald Trump did not dare to repeat his demand for unconditional surrender of that new supreme leader. Before stepping up to the microphone at his golf resort today, Donald Trump made phone calls to individual members of the media in a desperate attempt to communicate something positive to the stock market, the real bosses of Donald Trump's war. One of those calls was to Fox's Brian Kilmeade, who quoted Donald Trump on Fox and Friends this morning, telling him, quote, "These ships should go through the Strait of Hormuz and show some guts. There's nothing to be afraid of. Show some guts." 20% of the world's oil shipments pass through the Strait of Hormuz, which has now become far too dangerous for safe passage. Shipping traffic has dropped by at least 90% in the strait or more. And Donald Trump's solution to that is for everyone on those oil tankers to just be brave, like him. Donald Trump wants the captains and crews of those ships to be brave and put themselves in the line of fire, put themselves in harm's way. Just call their families at home around the world and tell them, wish me luck. We are bravely going through the strait today because Donald Trump told us to show some guts. Donald Trump wants the non-combatants on commercial vessels to do something that no one in the Trump clan has ever done. Enter a war zone. Show some guts. How about 19-year-old Barron Trump, who is turning 20 in 11 days? As I reported on this program last week, all 4 of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's sons served in the military in World War II, while their father served as commander-in-chief until his death in office weeks before Germany's unconditional surrender. It was unthinkable then for a president's son not to serve in that president's war. And World War II was not a war of Franklin Roosevelt's choosing. We entered World War II only after Japan declared war on the United States and then Germany declared war on the United States. But because World War II was already underway in Europe in 1939, John Kennedy decided not to go to Yale Law School after his Harvard graduation, and instead joined the Navy months before the United States entered World War II. Jack Kennedy, the future brother, the future president's older brother, Joe Kennedy, dropped out of Harvard Law School to become a pilot in World War II. Joe Kennedy's plane went down and he was killed in action in Europe. Such was the call of duty in those days, that the sons of presidents, the sons of cabinet members, the sons of ambassadors, the sons of generals, along with the sons of laborers and factory workers, all showed some guts, as Donald Trump would put it, and rushed toward the sound of the guns. In fact, almost all Harvard students dropped out during World War II to serve in the military. So what about Barron Trump? Why hasn't he left college, like almost every Harvard student did during World War II, to fight in his father Donald Trump's war? And I mention Harvard specifically because that is the institution of higher learning in America that Donald Trump seems to hate the most. It is the institution that seems to fill him with a raging jealousy for reasons known only to his pathologically insecure psyche. Of the 1,000 students, the 1,000 students admitted to the Harvard class of 1944 before World War II started, only 19 graduated in 1944. That's how much America's universities emptied out as students followed what they felt was their call of duty into war. No one, Donald Trump, no one in the Trump family has ever done anything like that in the entire history of the Klan. Not one Trump. Not one. No Trump has ever attended a military funeral of a family member, and now it's Barron Trump's turn to refuse to go to war while his father sends young men and women his age into that war. Why doesn't Barron Trump do what all those Harvard students did during World War II? Why doesn't he leave college now and go join his father's war? Why doesn't Barron Trump donate his services as a crew member on an oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz? He doesn't even have to join the military for that. His father said there's nothing to be afraid of. Does his mother agree with that? Does she think there's nothing to be afraid of for her son on one of those oil tankers? Donald Trump said these ships should go through the Strait of Hormuz and show some guts. There's nothing to be afraid of. Well, let's prove there's nothing to be afraid of by putting Barron on the deck of one of those ships, because we know the only place Donald Trump would allow Barron to go, the only place where Barron Trump's mother would ever allow him to go, is a place where there's nothing to be afraid of. Donald Trump's other sons appear to be playing their part in their father's war by trying to become war profiteers. There was nothing more loathsome in the United States during World War II than war profiteering. Harry Truman became president of the United States because of his crusade against war profiteering. Senator Harry Truman studied war contracts more than any other senator, searching for illegitimate profiteering. He eventually became the chairman of a special Senate committee to investigate war profiteering. Senator Truman's investigations were at first a minor irritant to President Franklin Roosevelt, who was worried about anything that might inhibit America's industrial giants like the auto industry, which was then converting their factories for the manufacture of aircraft and tanks. But soon President Roosevelt came to appreciate Senator Truman's policing of the war contracts and Senator Truman's condemnations of any war profiteers that his investigations exposed. Imagine Donald Trump appreciating congressional investigations of potential corruption in the war contracts that he awards, he personally awards, he personally interferes with and delivers to the companies he wants to deliver those awards to. Franklin Roosevelt actually appreciated Harry Truman's investigations and condemnations of war profiteering so much that President Roosevelt chose Harry Truman to run with him as his vice presidential nominee as President Roosevelt ran for his final re-election campaign during World War II. Harry Truman then became president after President Roosevelt died in office. Harry Truman would hate what the Wall Street Journal is now reporting about Donald Trump and his sons. The Wall Street Journal reports Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., the president's sons, are backing a new drone company that is vying to meet fresh demand from the Pentagon and fill a hole left by the administration's ban on new Chinese drones in the U.S. Power Us, a drone roll-up company based in West Palm Beach, Florida, is merging with a publicly traded golf course holding company backed by the Trumps. Power Us executives said investors in the deal include one of the Trump's investment vehicles, American Ventures, and Unusual Machines, a drone components company where Donald Trump Jr. is a shareholder and advisory board member. The deal brings deeper involvement by the Trump family into a multi-billion-dollar sector that has new opportunities for growth following changes imposed by the Trump administration. Those include the Pentagon's emphasis on large-scale, rapid adoption of small drones. When Donald Trump started his war, he called it a war. He called it a war multiple times, and that is what it is. Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense also called it a war when the war began, which he especially loved doing since he falsely calls himself the Secretary of War. But now that Donald Trump realizes that Americans don't like war, and maybe being reminded that he campaigned against war when he was running for president, Donald Trump is twisting the language to avoid the word war.
I mean, this was an excursion that a lot of people wouldn't have done.
An excursion. That's his latest description of his war today. An excursion. Donald Trump finds new ways to dishonor the war dead. A silly hat, and now an excursion. It's one thing to die in a war whose objective the president cannot explain. Americans have done that before and have done it since Vietnam. But to die in an excursion, to call it an excursion, before the families have even had the funerals, to struggle to find language that demeans those soldiers' sacrifice in service to his desperate political needs is a uniquely Trumpian moment in the American presidency. Tonight, there was another dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base for Army Sergeant Benjamin Pennington, 26 years old, of Glendale, Kentucky. Donald Trump wasn't there. Donald Trump did not attend. But he did attend a fundraiser for House Speaker Mike Johnson today in Florida at Donald Trump's golf resort there. And if you're paging through the history books trying to find the president who went to a political fundraiser at a golf club on the 10th day of a war, you can stop right now. Only the guy who said, show some guts, there's nothing to be afraid of, would show his guts by going to a fundraiser instead of the second dignified transfer of his war of choosing. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will join us after this break. Today, global oil prices continue to surge as Donald Trump's war with Iran continues to disrupt energy markets and the global economy. Oil briefly spiked to nearly $120 a barrel overnight before coming back down during the day. The world's largest economies held an emergency meeting of the G7 today to discuss whether they may need to release emergency reserves to stabilize the oil and gas markets. CNBC reports about 20% of the world's oil supply is being disrupted by Donald Trump's war, with traffic in the Strait of Hormuz just south of Iran at a standstill. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. The outcome with the oil markets was one of the predictable effects of this war, but Donald Trump seems to have been taken by surprise by it.
Yeah, and the two big winners from this big surprise that he was the only person not to see are his big oil billionaire cronies who've seen the price of their product go through the roof, one of the things that's notable is that American oil producers who are selling oil to Americans raised their prices when foreign issues change the international oil market. Their cost of production hasn't changed, so they're going to make a fortune. And of course, the other big winner is Vladimir Putin, who is winning not only because Trump released him from sanctions so that he can get more revenue. Oil prices are up, so the spigot of money to keep his war machine against Ukraine going is flipped wide open. And the arms that we have been providing to Ukraine are now being spent in Iran, and that lowers the overall supply, throw in other needs, and I'm sure we'll shortly see Hegseth and others saying, well, we'd love to help Ukraine, but we simply don't have the war material any longer. So Putin's number one goal has been to succeed at annexing Ukraine by violence, and he's also the one person in the world to whom President Trump insists on showing submissiveness, and not try to be the dominant person in the relationship. He's the submissive in this relationship. So there is pain all around economically from the decision Trump evidently didn't see the consequences of, except in those two corners of Trump allies.
So Donald Trump spent some time on the phone with Vladimir Putin today. What could that possibly have been about?
Yeah, nothing good for Ukraine, just to begin with. And as you know, there is a long connection between Trump and Russia. Trump likes to call it the Trump-Russia hoax. But as you know better than anyone, Lawrence, when Trump uses the word hoax, it's his verbal tell for something that is absolutely true. So Trump-Russia has been a long standing thing. We do not fully understand it yet. There's also a Russia-Epstein connection that we don't fully understand yet, which makes Trump-Russia and Trump-Epstein more of a complicated triangle of Trump, Russia, Epstein. But I would be very interested to know what took place in that conversation between him and President Putin. Nothing good for Ukraine, I'm sure.
So Donald Trump never announced either an objective or a timeline at the beginning of his war, which seems to leave it open to him to decide exactly when his war ends, which might mean that the stock market will tell him when his war ends.
Yeah, I think it's become his style to try to play things fast and loose and keep everybody guessing, which is fine if you are, running a casino or selling yourself as a TV host on an entertainment show. But when you've got the reputation of the United States, when you've got the lives of American service members, and when you've got massive economic consequences for American families all on the line, you'd like to think that he would have put the effort in to thinking it through a little bit.
And as we go forward, Donald Trump's notion of unconditional surrender, I'm sure he'll never bring it up again, and it'll just be forgotten. But he obviously has no idea what that even looks like. But we're certainly not any closer to that impossible dream after the new leadership choice in Iran.
No, in fact, Iran has had an enormous amount of destruction wreaked on its traditional military apparatus. There's no doubt about that. But clearly the spirit of the Iranian extremists has not been broken when they put the Ayatollah's even more aggressive and conservative son in as his replacement. There's no sign of looking unconditionally surrendering there. And they have operatives all around the world. They have drone technology that is very inexpensive. And believe it or not, there's been news reporting by the Washington Post that Vladimir Putin, the Russians, have been helping the Iranians target American service members. I wonder if that came up in the conversation between Trump and Putin, that Putin is actually helping Iran kill our service members. Ordinarily, that would be the kind of thing that would irritate an American president, maybe even anger him, maybe even put some real pressure on Putin to knock it off. But whatever he has on Putin, that has not happened.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for starting off our discussions tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, the Trump Justice Department has released more of the Epstein files, as it's required to do under the law passed by our next guest, Congressman Ro Khanna. That's next. Donald Trump's Justice Department released more of the Epstein files, including notes from FBI interviews with a woman who said she was sexually assaulted by Donald Trump when she was 13 years old. It is unclear how fully the FBI investigated her claims, and Donald Trump has denied any wrongdoing linked to Epstein. According to an MS Now analysis of the 20 newly released documents, which comprise fewer than 1,000 pages, notwithstanding the small size of the production and the Justice Department's repeated assurances that it would protect victim safety and privacy, MS Now found the first and or last names of at least 21 known or suspected survivors. Some of these names were left unredacted multiple times. Epstein survivor Danielle Bensky said this on this network earlier today.
We've had so many conversations with the Democrats, the Republicans. We're in offices and we're constantly saying how important the redaction process is and getting it right is. And you would think that after twice already, especially after the last release where, our lawyers talked to them, everybody's, there's been so much conversation around this topic. And then to see it yet again on Friday or Thursday, I believe it was, is just, it's really beyond, frustrating puts it so mildly. Yeah. It's gutting.
In a statement, House Oversight Committee Democrats said, let's be clear, this White House cover-up is ongoing. Millions of pages still remain concealed from the public and our committee. We will get answers when Pam Bondi appears before our committee under oath. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee. Let me begin with what we just heard from yet another survivor about the redactions problem. I don't even know what to call it, that this Trump Justice Department could continue to put out material that does not have their names redacted.
It's heartless. And these survivors are reliving their trauma. They're being victimized a second time. And it's preventable. Bradley Edwards, who's been on your program, who you introduced, he has been offering to go to the DOJ to help set up the protocols. He said, let me get the other survivors' lawyers in there. And they are not involving them. Yeah, they'll return an email, but it takes Bradley Edwards barraging the DOJ. And it just shows a total callousness. Meanwhile, they're covering up for the president. They're covering up in terms of at least his embarrassment and not releasing these 3 files that they were forced to release. And they're covering up for people who actually abused these girls.
So millions of Epstein file documents still not released, which just, I assume, means your crusade on this continues.
It continues because it's personal, because these survivors have sat in my office, they've sat in Thomas Massey's office, they were abused, they were raped, and they want justice. And the half of the files that are out proves to the country that what we were talking about was not a hoax, that some of the most powerful people are involved. And the worst stuff is still in these files, that the names of some of these people, which have been scrubbed by Donald Trump's FBI. But look, here's why people shouldn't give up hope, because when people cover it, when journalists make a big deal of it, then suddenly Pam Bondi relents and then we get 10,000 more files, 40,000 more files. So we need to just be on this until we can get a judge to order the release of the rest of the files.
And of course, Donald Trump launches wars in Venezuela or Iran to try to deflect from this, among other reasons. The Pam Bondi testimony that I just referred to, I know people in the audience out there are thinking, oh, okay, so So the Attorney General is going to come to the committee and do her usual insult comedian bad act in front of your committee. Is that the way it's going to go?
It won't. And it's so disrespectful seeing her do that when survivors are there. But this time she's not going to be able to go just insult me or insult Robert Garcia. She's going to be deposed. And she's going to be...
So a deposition is completely different from what people have grown accustomed to as a congressional hearing with the Attorney General.
Completely different, because the people asking her the questions are going to be qualified lawyers. They're going to get an hour, not 5 minutes. She's going to have to answer those questions under oath, not just respond with barbs at members of Congress. And this is why it was so important what Nancy Mace, myself, Robert Garcia did. I mean, we got 24-19. We won that vote to subpoena Pam Bondi to be under oath. And she's going to have to explain, why were these 3 files covered up that involved Donald Trump? Why are half the files still redacted and not being shown to the American people? Why was there the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell? There's a lot she has to explain. And by the way, the next president can prosecute her. Now, maybe Trump preemptively pardons her, but Trump is not known to stick around with people who are political liabilities.
Yeah, there's real legal liability for her in under oath testimony on this matter.
And it's finally going to be forcing her to answer the questions. They ask her, why is the file still redacted? She says, well, Thomas Massey, you don't know what you're talking about. Now she's going to have to answer yes or no under oath. It is one of the most significant moments when we're going to get her under oath.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And coming up, we'll take a look at Donald Trump's new choice for Secretary of Homeland Security after his first choice has gone wherever she's gone. That's next. Speaking of war profiteering, Donald Trump's choice to be the next Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma, has made some interesting stock trades this year. The Daily Beast reports 5 days before military action in Venezuela, Mullin purchased substantial positions in defense contractor RTX Corp and oil giants Chevron and ConocoPhillips, according to Capital Trades. Based on those federal disclosure filings and publicly available share price data, Mullin made up to $35,000 from the trio of positions by Monday. Senator Mullin is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee with access to non-public information about U.S. military operations. After buying Chevron, Markwayne Mullin then publicly urged others to buy the stock he already bought without publicly disclosing that he bought that stock. Senator Mullin said this on CNBC.
I mean, look at Chevron. We've had relationships in Venezuela for years. The problem was under Maduro, it really became uninvestable. Once that stabilizes, every major company is going to be buying to get involved in that area because there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for the company and for their shareholders.
Senator Mullin's confirmation hearing will be in the Senate Homeland Security Committee, which is chaired by Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. The Daily Beast reports during a breakfast in Tulsa, Oklahoma last month, Mullin voiced his frustration with Senator Rand Paul. Rand Paul's a freaking snake, Mullin said. Joining us now is Garrett Graff, journalist and historian who covers federal law enforcement. Garrett, thank you very much for joining us tonight. So first of all, is Markwayne Mullin an upgrade from Kristi Noem?
Not at all. And I think that this is one of the things that it's easy to look past because I think the whole country is taking a deep breath of relief that Kristi Noem is out atop DHS. However, it's worth pointing out that Markwayne Mullin is not in any way qualified to actually be the secretary of the nation's third largest cabinet department. And in fact, not only is he unqualified, he is underqualified even in comparison to Kristi Noem or even Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon. That he is someone who has no government experience, he has no law enforcement experience, he has no military experience, he has no intelligence experience, and in fact has never worked in the private sector outside of his own family businesses.
And his government experience is just the United States Senate, where he gets to manage a Senate staff, which for the state of Oklahoma is not that big. It's less than 50 people.
Exactly. And that even in the House, where he served several terms and then came to the Senate, he has never served on the Homeland Security Committee in either body. And I think, you know, in some ways it may seem old-fashioned, even in the Trump administration, to be talking about competency or management experience, but I think it should still matter to us whether the people who are being nominated for these jobs have even the most basic set of qualifications necessary to do them.
There are a bunch of ways to go in the Senate confirmation hearing, including looking back at the Kristi Noem operation there and all the various conflicts of interest and all of the favorable contract deals that were given. The Democrats could focus on that in this confirmation hearing. But what are the range of ways to go in this confirmation hearing as you see it?
Yeah, to me, I think there's obviously a lot of opportunity to look backward. But the thing that we should really try to stay focused on is what's still to come. And I think Americans are misunderstanding the scale of the immigration spending still to come that has come out of this Republican funding surge last summer. I had a piece in the recently about the construction and procurement budget for Customs and Border Protection. It is a number around $54 billion for this year, which is a number so large that it is actually larger than the entire annual defense budgets of all but 5 European countries. And the money that is still available to be spent in that budget right now is equal to the entire GDP of the country of Estonia.
And that's for the operation of these warehouses where they expect to store thousands of people?
That's an entirely other budget. That is all in ICE's detention budget, still tens of billions of dollars to spend there as well. And I think we should be paying real close attention and pushing Markwayne Mullin as the nominee about what oversight is going to be available and expected and what level of transparency about how that money is being spent is going to be available to members of Congress going forward. This is really, to me, one of the last major opportunities that Congress has to change the trajectory of our immigration spending.
And we've seen Committee Chairman Rand Paul has said that he sees no legal justification for the shooting and killing of Renee Good or Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. So we can expect something from the chairman on that.
Absolutely. And again, we're really just seeing the beginning of the effects of these new hires at ICE and CBP and the new construction budgets and the new detention facilities. To me, there's plenty more scandals still to come this year, and that's all going to end up on Markwayne Mullin's plate.
Garrett Graff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Anytime.
Tonight's last word, a special last word, is next. In dramatic testimony, Alexander Butterfield revealed to the world that President Richard Nixon's criminal conspiracy inside the White House was all on tape. Alexander Butterfield delivered that testimony in July 1973 to the Watergate Committee and changed the course of history. The president was recorded in his own voice committing crimes in the Oval Office. Richard Nixon resigned the presidency in disgrace and received a pardon from his successor, President Gerald Ford. As a result of the investigation of the president, 48 Nixon administration officials were found guilty of crimes. Alexander Butterfield joined this program in July 2022 after he watched former White House staffer Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony about the Trump White House given to the January 6th committee. Alexander Butterfield praised Cassidy Hutchinson and said this about his historic testimony.
What nobody knew, I felt it was my responsibility and that I was the person who was told to put in this system.
Alexander Butterfield died today at his home in San Diego. He leaves his wife, Kim, his 2 daughters, 8 grandchildren, and 13 great-grandchildren. Alexander Butterfield was 99 years old. That is tonight's last word. The 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhle starts now.
تخيل للحظة أنك تقف على عتبة منزلين مختلفين في حيين متباعدين في يوم عادي من أيام الجمعة. الرائحة التي تستقبلك في كلا المكانين واحدة في هويتها، ولكنها مختلفة في روحها. رائحة الأرز المتبل والدجاج أو اللحم المحمر ومزيج الطماطم الغني، إنها رائحة الكبسة. ولكن لماذا تشعر وأنت تجلس على مائدة البيت الأول أن النكهة تعيدك إلى طفولة بعيدة دافئة ومألوفة؟ ولماذا تجد في البيت الثاني نكهة مختلفة، ربما تكون أغنى أو أبسط أو تحمل لمسة غريبة لا تستطيع تعريفها؟ الكبسة، ذلك الطبق الذي يعد سيد الموائد في الجزيرة العربية والخليج، وجزءا لا يتجزأ من الهوية العربية. تحمل في طياتها سرا كبيرا. السر ليس في المكونات الرئيسية وحدها، بل في تلك التفاصيل الدقيقة، في فلسفة الطهي التي تنتقل من الجدات إلى الأمهات، وفي تلك اللمسات الصغيرة التي تحول الوجبة من مجرد طعام إلى بصمة عائلية لا تخطئها الذاكرة. في هذا الفيلم لن نتعلم فقط طريقة عمل الكبسة، بل سنقوم برحلة عميقة في كيمياء النكهة وتاريخ البهارات وفيزياء حبات الأرز، لنفهم لماذا لا توجد كبسة واحدة أصلية، بل آلاف الكبسات الأصلية، كل منها تحكي قصة بيت بأكمله. سنفك شفرة ذلك السر الخفي الذي يجعل طبقك ملكيا. أو لماذا يفشل البعض في الوصول إلى تلك القمة؟ استعد لاكتشاف الكبسة كما لم تسمع بها من قبل. لكي نفهم لماذا تختلف الكبسة من بيت لآخر، يجب علينا أولا أن نفهم من أين أتت هذه الكبسة أصلا. هي ليست مجرد وصفة عثر عليها في كتاب قديم، بل هي نتاج طبيعي لتاريخ وجغرافيا واقتصاد شبه الجزيرة العربية. لفهم الكبسة يجب أن نبدأ من رمال نجد والحجاز، حيث نشأت الحضارة العربية. تقليديا كانت الكبسة طبق البدو والحضر على حد سواء. البدو في تنقلاتهم المستمرة احتاجوا إلى طبق يجمع بين مكونات تدوم طويلا ولا تفسد، ومغذية تمدهم بالطاقة. وهنا يأتي الأرز الذي كان سلعة تجارية ثمينة، تأتي عبر موانئ الخليج والبحر الأحمر من الهند وجنوب شرق آسيا، واللحم الذي قد يكون من الأغنام أو الإبل، وأهم عنصر على الإطلاق التوابل. لم تكن البهارات مجرد نكهة، بل كانت ثمرة موقع استراتيجي. كانت شبه الجزيرة العربية تقع على طرق تجارية عظيمة، مثل طريق البخور والتوابل الذي يربط جنوب آسيا واليمن بالبحر الأبيض المتوسط. هكذا وصل الهيل والقرنفل والزعفران والدارسين إلى قلب الجزيرة، وأصبحت مزيجها الفريد أساسا للكبسة. في المدن الكبرى مثل الرياض وجدة ومكة تطورت الكبسة لتصبح طبقا للحفلات والمناسبات الكبيرة. كانت الولائم تقام وتطبخ الكبسة في قدور ضخمة تكفي لعشرات الأشخاص. هذا الطابع الاجتماعي جعل الكبسة مرآة للكرم العربي، فالبيت الذي لا تفوح منه رائحة الكبسة في الأعياد والأفراح هو بيت ناقص. تطورت الطريقة مع الزمن، فمع بداية النفط والانفتاح الاقتصادي دخلت مكونات جديدة مثل معجون الطماطم الجاهز ومكعبات مرق الدجاج وأنواع مختلفة من الأرز طويل الحبة مثل البسمتي الذي فضل على الأرز الهندي الأحمر أو المصري الأقصر حبة، لأنه يعطي منظرا أنيقا وحبات منفصلة. لكن التطور لم يغير الجوهر. الكبسة ظلت مرتبطة بمفهوم المخباط والتنور، تلك الأدوات التقليدية التي كانت تعطي الأرز مدخنة لا تنسى. اليوم الكبسة تجسد فلسفة البيت بكل تفاصيله. هي لوحة بيضاء ترسمها كل عائلة بألوانها الخاصة. عائلة تميل إلى نكهة الطماطم الحادة، وأخرى تؤمن بسيادة اللحم نفسه، وثالثة تعتبر سرها في الدقة الخاصة بها، ذلك المزيج السري من البهارات الذي يطحن في البيت ولا يباع في الأسواق. إذن الاختلاف الذي نشعر به ليس عشوائيا، بل هو تراكم لقرون من التأثيرات الجغرافية والاجتماعية والاقتصادية، مطبوعا في كل حبة أرز وكل ذرة بهار. لننتقل الآن إلى قلب اللوحة، المكونات. كل عنصر في الكبسة ليس موجودا بالمصادفة، بل هو جزء من معادلة متكاملة لتحقيق التناغم النهائي. القاعدة تبدأ باللحم أو الدجاج. اختيار نوع اللحم يغير كل شيء. لحم الضأن بدسمه المعتدل ونكهته المميزة يعطي الكبسة غنى وعمقا. لحم الإبل الأكثر جفافا ونكهة خاصة كان خيار البدو الكلاسي. الدجاج البلدي بقساوته النسبية ونكهته القوية هو الأقدر على تحمل ساعات الطهي الطويلة دون أن يتفكك، ويضيف للمرق نكهة مركزة. أما علميا فإن اللحوم الحمراء تحتوي على نسب أعلى من الحديد والميوغلوبين، مما ينتج أثناء الطهي نكهات أمامي غنية ومعقدة لا يستطيع الدجاج محاكاتها إلا إذا طهي بجلده وعظامه. التحمير الأولي للحم في السمن أو الزيت هو عملية كيميائية حاسمة، تفاعل ميلارد، حيث تتفاعل الأحماض الأمينية مع السكريات المختزلة على سطح اللحم تحت حرارة عالية لتنتج مئات المركبات العطرية التي تعطي النكهة المحمرة المميزة. هذا هو أول سر من أسرار العمق. ثم تأتي البصلة، قد تبدو بسيطة لكنها أساس بناء النكهة. البصل غني بالسكريات الطبيعية والكبريت. عند تقطيعه وتسويته ببطء على نار هادئة في السمن تبدأ سكرياته في الكراميل وتتحول إلى اللون الذهبي وتطلق نكهة حلوة وعميقة. هذا الكراميل هو الذي سيربط نكهة اللحم بنكهة البهارات ليكون الجسر الذي تعبر عليه جميع المكونات. الكثيرون يستعجلون هذه المرحلة ولا يعطون البصل حقه من الوقت، فيفقدون فرصة الحصول على هذه القاعدة الذهبية. البهارات هي روح الكبسة وهي مصدر الاختلاف الأكبر. التركيبة التقليدية تتضمن عادة الهيل، القرنفل، القرفة، الدارسين، الفلفل الأسود، الكمون، الكزبرة الجافة، والكركم أو الزعفران للون. لكل بهار وظيفة كيميائية وعضوية. الهيل ملك البهارات، يحتوي على مركبات مثل التربينات التي تعطي رائحة منعشة ودافئة. القرنفل القوي والحاد يحتوي على الأوجينون وهو مخدر طبيعي بكميات قليلة يعطي دفئا وبكثرة يقتل كل نكهة. القرفة تضيف حلاوة خشبية. الكمون والكزبرة الجافة ينتميان إلى عائلة الخيميات ويضيفان نكهة ترابية وجوزية تعزز من طعم اللحم. الكركم والزعفران ليس فقط للون الذهبي الجميل، فالكركم يحتوي على الكركمين وهو مضاد أكسدة قوي، والزعفران يحتوي على مركبات مثل السافرانال والكروسين المسؤولة عن رائحته الأسطورية ولونه. سر الخلطة العائلية يكمن في نسب هذه البهارات وفي تحميسها قبل الطحن. تحميس البهارات الكاملة على نار جافة يطير زيوتها الطيارة وينقيها من الرطوبة ويجعل رائحتها أقوى وأكثر تركيزاً. طحنها بعد ذلك مباشرة يضمن الحصول على نكهة متفجرة، بينما البهارات المطحونة الجاهزة تكون فقدت جزءاً كبيراً من زيتها العطري مع الوقت. معجون الطماطم أو الطماطم الطازجة عنصر آخر محوري. الطماطم تحتوي على الجلوتامات الطبيعية وهي المسؤولة عن نكهة الأمامي أو الطعم اللذيذ. طبخ الطماطم لفترة طويلة يكثف هذه النكهة ويقلل حموضتها ويضيف لونا أحمر برتقالي جميل للمرق. هناك مدرستان: مدرسة تفضل استخدام الطماطم الطازجة المبشورة للحصول على نضارة، وأخرى تفضل المعجون المركز للحصول على لون أغمق ونكهة أقوى. كلاهما صحيح، لكنهما يعطيان نتيجة مختلفة. الأرز مستقبل كل هذه النكهات. الأرز البسمتي طويل الحبة هو الأفضل لأنه يتميز بحبته الصلبة التي تبقى منفصلة بعد الطهي، عكس الأرز المصري أو الأمريكي قصير الحبة الذي يميل للالتصاق. الأرز عبارة عن نشاء بنسبة كبيرة. أثناء الطهي تمتص الحبة المرق وتحمل معها كل جزيئات النكهة الدائبة، المطلوب هو أن يتشرب الأرز المرق بالكامل وأن تنضج حبته دون أن تتفكك. هذا يتطلب توازنا دقيقا بين كمية السائل والحرارة والوقت. أخيرا، السمن البلدي أو السمن الحيواني، هذه نقطة فاصلة بين كبسة عادية وكبسة أسطورية. السمن الحيواني خاصة من حليب الغنم أو البقر هو دهن غني بالأحماض الدهنية التي تحمل النكهات الدائبة في الدهون بشكل أفضل من الزيوت النباتية. إضافة ملعقة من السمن البلدي في النهاية أو قليل مكسرات به يضيف طبقة نهائية من الغنى واللمعة والنكهة الحليبية الدافئة التي لا يمكن للزيوت تقليدها. الآن وقد فهمنا مكونات اللوحة، حان وقت الرسم. مرحلة الطهي هي مسرح العمليات، حيث تتحول الكيمياء إلى فن. تبدأ العملية دائما بالتتبيلة، تتبيل اللحم أو الدجاج قبل الطهي بساعات، ويفضل من الليل، بالبهارات الجافة واللبن أو الخل وعصير الليمون. اللبن حمضي، فهو يساعد على تطرية الألياف العضلية للحم بتكسير الروابط البروتينية، ويسمح للبهارات بالتغلغل إلى الداخل بدلا من بقائها على السطح. بعد التتبيل تأتي مرحلة التحمير. هنا الحرارة العالية هي الصديق. عند وضع قطع اللحم في السمن الساخن جدا يجب أن تترك مسافة بين القطع حتى لا تطهى على البخار. الهدف هو تفعيل تفاعل ميلارد الذي ذكرناه. هذه القشرة البنية المحمرة هي كنز من النكهة. إذا كانت المقلاة مزدحمة تنخفض الحرارة ويبدأ اللحم بفقدان عصائره بدلا من تحميرها. بعد التحمير يرفع اللحم ويضاف البصل للوعاء نفسه ليحمل كل القطع البنية الملتصقة بقاع القدر، وهذا هو جوهر النكهة. بعد أن يدبل البصل ويصبح ذهبيا تضاف البهارات المطحونة. هذا توقيت مهم جدا. إضافة البهارات إلى السمن الساخن مباشرة مع البصل يحمسها قليلا، مما يوقد زيوتها العطرية بسرعة، لكن يجب الحذر من احتراقها لأنها تصبح مرة. بعد ثوان يضاف معجون الطماطم ويقلب حتى يتغير لونه إلى الداكن قليلا وتختفي حموضته اللاذعة، ثم يعاد اللحم ويغمر بالماء الساخن. الماء الساخن يحافظ على استمرارية الطهي ولا يوقف التفاعلات الحرارية كما يفعل الماء البارد. هنا تبدأ مرحلة الطبخ الطويلة. يترك القدر على نار هادئة جدا لساعات. الحرارة المنخفضة والوقت الطويل يسمحان للكولاجين في اللحم بالتحول إلى جيلاتين، مما يجعل اللحم طريا يذوب في الفم ويمنح المرق قواما ثقيلا وغنى لا يضاهى. هذا الجيلاتين سيلعب دورا مهما لاحقا مع الأرز، حيث سيكسوه بطبقة رقيقة تعطي الإحساس بالفخامة في الفم. إذا كان الطهي على نار عالية فسيجف المرق بسرعة قبل أن ينضج اللحم، وسيبقى اللحم قاسيا. بعد نضج اللحم واستخلاص نكهة المرق ترفع القطع ويصفى المرق من الشوائب، ثم يقاس بدقة، وهذه معضلة رئيسية: كمية المرق مقابل كمية الأرز. النسبة التقليدية غالبا ما تكون 2.5 كوب من المرق لكل كوب من الأرز البسمتي، لكن هذا يعتمد على نوع الأرز نفسه وعلى قوة الغليان. بعض أنواع الأرز تمتص أكثر من غيرها. الآن مرحلة الأرز الحاسمة. يضاف الأرز المغسول والمنقوع إلى المرق المغلي. الغسيل الجيد يزيل النشاء السطحي الذي يسبب التصاق الحبوب. النقع 20 ل 30 دقيقة يساعد الأرز على امتصاص بعض الماء مسبقا، مما يجعله يطهى بشكل متجانس وأقل عرضة للكسر. بمجرد أن يغلي الأرز في المرق تخفض الحرارة إلى أهدأ ما يمكن ويغطى القدر بإحكام. الطهي بالبخار هو ما يحدث الآن. حبات الأرز في الأسفل تطهى بالسائل، والأعلى تطهى بالبخار المتصاعد. عدم فتح الغطاء خلال هذه الفترة حوالي 20 ل 30 دقيقة هو قاعدة ذهبية، لأن كل فتحة تطلق بخارا ثمينا وتخلخل الضغط والحرارة داخل القدر، مما يؤدي إلى عدم نضج الأرز بشكل متساوي. بعد انتهاء الوقت تعاد قطع اللحم إلى وجه الأرز وتترك لترتاح لبضع دقائق قبل التقديم. في هذه المرحلة يمكن وضع فحم مشتعل في قطعة قصدير بها قطرة من السمن داخل القدر، ثم تغطية القدر بسرعة ليمتص الأرز نفحة الدخان التي تذكرنا بأيام الطبخ على الحطب. هذه اللمسة الأخيرة ترفع الكبسة من طبق جيد إلى طبق لا ينسى. لكن لماذا يفشل الكثيرون في الوصول إلى هذه النتيجة؟ الأخطاء الشائعة لا حصر لها، لكنها تتركز حول بضع نقاط رئيسية. أولاً، استخدام بهارات مطحونة قديمة أو رديئة الجودة. البهارات إذا بقيت لأشهر في الخزانة تفقد زيوتها الطيارة وتتحول إلى مجرد بودرة ذات طعم ترابي باهت. الحل هو شراء البهارات كاملة وتحميصها وطحنها في المنزل كل فترة. ثانياً، الإسراف في استخدام البهارات أو التقتير فيها. الخلطة ليست مجرد نثر عشوائي. بعض البهارات مثل القرنفل والقرفة يجب استخدامها بحساب لأنها تطغى على كل شيء. الظن بأن الكثرة تغلب الشجاعة خطأ فادح في الطهي. ثالثاً، إهمال مرحلة التحمير. اللحم الشاحب المسلوق مباشرة في الماء لا يمكن أن يعطي نفس نكهة اللحم المحمر. هذا التحمير هو الذي يبني قاعدة النكهة، وتخطيه يعني البدء من نقطة الصفر. رابعاً، عدم تصفية المرق. الشوائب والعظام الصغيرة والبهارات الكاملة إذا تركت في المرق فإنها تعطي طعماً غير ناعم وقد تسبب مرارة. المرق الصافي هو سر الملمس المخملي. خامساً، خطأ حساب كمية الماء. الرز البسمتي حساس جداً. زيادة الماء تجعله عصيدة أو مهلبية. نقصان الماء يبقيه قاسياً نيئاً. يجب استخدام كوب قياس دقيق ومراقبة نوع الأرز. سادساً، فتح القدر أثناء طهي الأرز، وهو خطأ قاتل لسببين: فقدان البخار اللازم للنضج وكسر دورة الحرارة. سابعاً، استخدام أرز رديء أو قديم. الأرز البسمتي الجيد يكون طويل الحبة وأطرافه مدببة. إذا كان الأرز مكسوراً أو قصيراً فسيكون الناتج غير مقبول. وأخيراً، الاعتقاد الخاطئ بأن الكبسة يجب أن تكون جافة تماماً. الكبسة الناجحة هي التي تكون كل حبة أرز مستقلة، ولكنها في نفس الوقت ندية ولينة وطرية، وليست جافة أو صلبة. بعض الوصفات الحديثة تبالغ في تجفيف الأرز، وهذا يفقده متعة تذوقه. مع تطور الزمن لم تقف الكبسة عند حدودها التقليدية، دخلت عليها تحويرات عديدة تعكس تغير الأذواق وأنماط الحياة. في المطاعم الفاخرة نرى كبسة حاشي تقدم بطريقة تفكيكية، حيث يوضع اللحم منزوع العظم فوق الأرز وتزين بالمكسرات والزبيب بطريقة فنية. بعض المطاعم تقدمها في قدور فردية محاولة إعادة إحساس البيت، ولكن بطابع أنيق. أما في البيوت فالتطور الأكبر كان نحو الصحة. أصبح البعض يستبدل الأرز الأبيض بالأرز البني أو البرغل للحصول على ألياف أكثر ومؤشر جلايسيمي أقل. يتم تقليل كمية السمن والزيت واستخدام صدور الدجاج منزوعة الجلد بدل الدجاج الكامل، لكن هذا عادة ما يكون على حساب النكهة والعصارة. هناك أيضا من يحاول إضافة خضروات مثل الجزر والبازلاء والفلفل الملون، مما يزيد القيمة الغذائية ويضيف ألوانا زاهية. على المستوى الإقليمي هناك اختلافات دقيقة، فالكبسة في الكويت تميل أحيانا إلى استخدام الديك الرومي أو إضافة الليمون الأسود اللومي لإعطاء نكهة مدخنة حامضة. في الإمارات قد تجدها مطبوخة مع الحليب أو اللين لإضفاء قوام كريمي خفيف. في عمان تتأثر بالمطبخ البحري وقد تستخدم السمك بدل اللحم. وفي السعودية نفسها تختلف كبسة نجد الوسطى عن كبسة المنطقة الشرقية أو الغربية. كبسة المنطقة الوسطى غالبا ما تكون معتمدة على اللحم والطماطم بشكل كثيف، بينما في المنطقة الغربية الحجاز قد تميل إلى استخدام الأرز المصري القصير وتأثيرات من المطبخ التركي والمصري. هذا التنوع هو ما يثري التراث ويجعل الكبسة طبقا ديناميكيا. من الناحية الغذائية الكبسة هي وجبة متكاملة إلى حد كبير، تحتوي على النشويات من الأرز الذي يمد الجسم بالطاقة، والبروتين الحيواني من اللحم أو الدجاج الضروري لبناء العضلات، وقليل من الدهون خصوصا إذا استخدم السمن باعتدال. القيمة الحرارية للوجبة تعتمد على حجم الحصة ونسبة اللحم إلى الأرز. طبق متوسط من الكبسة مع الدجاج قد يحتوي على 600 إلى 800 سعرة حرارية. البهارات ليست فقط للنكهة بل لها فوائد صحية مثبتة. الكركم مضاد للالتهابات، والهيل يساعد في الهضم، والقرنفل مسكن طبيعي للألم. لكن هناك جانب يجب الحذر منه: الكبسة التقليدية تحتوي غالباً على نسبة عالية من الصوديوم، سواء من ملح الطعام أو من مكعبات المرق الجاهزة، وهذا يشكل خطراً على مرضى الضغط. أيضاً إذا أفرط الشخص في تناولها بانتظام مع قلة الحركة، فإن ارتفاع نسبة الكربوهيدرات والدهون قد يؤدي لزيادة الوزن. النصيحة الغذائية هنا هي الاعتدال، واستخدام الأرز البني وزيادة كمية الخضار المقدمة بجانبها، والاعتماد على بهارات طازجة بدل مكعبات المرق الصناعية. في النهاية نقف أمام حقيقة بسيطة وعميقة في نفس الوقت. الكبسة ليست مجرد وصفة نطبخها ونتناولها، إنها وعاء ثقافي يحمل في طياته تاريخ العائلة وذكريات الطفولة ولحظات الفرح والاجتماع. لماذا تختلف نكهتها من بيت لآخر؟ لأنها تحمل توقيع الطباخ، توقيع الجدة التي كانت تضبط البهار بكف يدها لا بميزان، توقيع الأم التي أضافت لمسة خاصة لأن ابنها يحب الطعم الحار، توقيع المنطقة التي نشأت فيها تلك العائلة. هي مرآة تعكس البيئة، الذوق الشخصي والتاريخ العائلي. الكبسة الأصلية ليست نموذجاً واحداً ثابتاً محفوراً في كتاب، بل هي ذلك الشعور بالدفء والألفة الذي ينتابك عندما تأكل من طبق أعدته يداً من تحب. هي ذاكرة النكهة التي تسعى كل عائلة لإعادة إنتاجها، ليس تماماً كما كانت، بل كما يجب أن تكون في هذه اللحظة. في كل حبة أرز وفي كل ذرة بهار تكمن قصة، وقصة الكبسة هي قصة الحياة العربية نفسها، غنية متنوعة دافئة ومتجددة. وفي المرة القادمة التي تشم فيها رائحة الكبسة تفوح من مطبخ ما، تذكر أنك لا تشم رائحة طعام فقط، بل رائحة تاريخ وذاكرة وبيت بأكمله.